How's everybody? Somebody took their 5-hour energy this morning. I am very pleased to announce our next speaker, who's going to speak on perspective, Dr. Gregory Carpenter. Please, everyone, give a nice CornCon welcome from Dr. Carpenter.
Okay, the haters are in the house. That's good. It's a good start. It's a good idea to sit in the back, by the way. That's a great idea. This is a dangerous talk as far as what I was told. So I used a lot of this material at the Army Counterintelligence School, and this is how you get honest people to confess to crimes that they never committed. So it's actually a pretty interesting talk, and hopefully you'll like it as much as I had fun putting it together. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, perspective and perception. You can see the learning objective. I'm not going to read them there, otherwise Wynne Schwartau will throw things at me. But I want you to understand it's a chance for self-reflection, to think about what's true and what truth is. And can you really have truth? You can have something that's a fact and it'll be true. You can have something that might be, I hate to use the word win, and I'm sorry, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, or BS. And BS might be accurate, but it's not true. So when you collectively put together true, 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 do you really get truth? Not always. And that's what we're going to get into, and boom. So, do you really understand, or do you really think you know what reality is? And I use this slide just for a basic understanding. This talks about our money supply. No big deal. But how many people actually realized or understood that currencies throughout the world are essentially worthless compared to what gold is now? And it wasn't that long ago that your currency actually had value to it. You know, when the Fed sets 3% inflation as its goal every year, do you realize what that compounding of interest on the money that they lend to the federal government does to you? It destroys your wealth. Key concepts first. One of the most important ones is the doublethink, doublespeak. Cognitive dissonance, believing two contrary things at the same time. We're all capable of it, we all do it, and we're extremely good at it. Perception itself, reflexive. Perspective is built from your belief system. It comes from everything that you learned as a child. It is hard to affect that. Your beliefs, your morals, your values, all those things that you had as a kid, your parents gave to you, your peers gave to you. They own you. And it makes it hard for you to think outside the box. And in that way, you're extremely vulnerable. So let's start here. We're going to have a really short popcorn moment, I'll call it. And I want you to think about what you're going to see. And at the end of it, don't be shy, just shout out exactly what you were sold. Okay? It's an advertisement, obviously. You've all seen this guy before. Let's see how the audio works. Awesome.
Here's to the crazy ones. The misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
What were you sold? Innovation? The apple, right, the apple is immaterial, right? Did they ever say Mac? Did they ever say Apple? Did they ever say Steve Jobs? You were sold what's called spontaneous trait transfer. You were shown people that you can identify with. You knew most of the people in that ad. You saw them. Einstein, Amelia Earhart, Martin Luther King. You know those people. You associate with them. And you respect pretty much every single one of them for whatever they had done. Their craziness, their innovation, their ability to think different. And you associate that with the young gentleman you saw up front, Steve Jobs. But you never get sold a computer. You get sold the idea that you respect people, and that transfers to someone else. And because of that, in your mind, he has a computer that allows you to think differently, that's innovative, that's special, that's crazy. But you never were sold anything other than the idea. These fake associations that are created stick with us through our life sometimes. You can't break that. No matter what new information you're given about any of those people up there, it's very difficult for you to change your perspective on what you think of them or how you think about their achievements. You're locked into it, and it stays for a very long time. Now, here's an interesting tidbit. There was a young gentleman back in the 1920s named Bernays, and he created, it was an advertising campaign, and basically he sold women on the fact that being equal with men meant smoking cigarettes, and it became one of the most powerful ad campaigns. And he wrote a book called Propaganda that is used all up and down Madison Avenue, all the advertising companies. They know this book well because the book actually taught how to convince populations, in general, whole populations, to be controlled by a corporate ad or how to be controlled by a government. And it very clearly spells out how to do both. One more chance here. Tell me what you're sold. Okay, who thinks you were sold soap? No, you weren't, right? All right. What were you sold? The concept of individuality, youth, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Concept of like a beauty standard.
The concept of a beauty standard. Spot on. You were taught that every woman is beautiful in their own way. Their uniqueness makes them beautiful. That's what you were sold. And you thought you were sold soap. So let's look at the techniques that are outlined in the propaganda book. You're pretty familiar with some of these, and I'm not going to get into too many of these. These are the terms they used back then, not Wynn's terms that he uses now. So if it doesn't match up, please understand I'm trying to stick with the original text. But one of the most important things that's used all the time is called framing. And you understand the concept of framing, you know, how you look at a problem, the perspective. So again, that goes to the core of touching to our morals, our belief systems. But think of framing this way. Think of calibrating a system, okay? You calibrate at 12 o'clock and you have 2 degrees of variance one way or the other. So what happens if you unknowingly are influenced one way or another and you don't see the scale 2 degrees one way or the other kind of shift? At some point, you're going to go outside of that variance because the framing of reality of what you think is correct is changed. And you change your beliefs, your values, and you'll shift over to a new perspective. It takes time, but it happens. People start to change how they think about things when they believe what they've been told that doesn't line up with what they had before. Innovative minds do this. They usually do it correctly, but populations are influenced all the time in a negative way. So the tactics that we're going to see here in a minute, we're going to talk about moral disengagement, which is another tremendously strong advertising, I'll say advertising versus propaganda technique. And it's sold a lot of people over time. Of course, System 1 thinking, and we'll get into that in a minute too. This is just to introduce you. Anybody remember Stanley Milgram? Dr. Milgram? You're going to learn about him a little bit here, and then we're going to talk about how he shook America to its core.
A decade earlier, psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Learn. Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud. Horse. Rock. House. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer. Horse.
Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're going to get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man there. I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering for less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
So think about that for a minute. Moral disengagement. You take responsibility away from yourself, and who was it that had the authority? It was, quote, a man in a white coat. Using the assumptions of the teacher role that the person was in, their assumption was that this was a scientist who understood scientific controls and methodology, things like that. In fact, they were all actors. Now, the voltage, again, as he said, it was fake. They didn't administer shocks of up to 500 volts to people. But it did talk to the point that people, if they were able to shirk responsibility and justify that to themselves, could kill people. 67%, 68% I think it was, of the people did exactly what they were told to do by the man in the white coat, just because they believed it was an authority figure. That's frightening in and of itself. Think about today, what happens today. Do we still do those things? Do we still shirk responsibility because somebody else said it's okay to do something that might be morally reprehensible or at least challenging for you to accept? We're sold things like this all the time. Sometimes we don't realize that it happens. So here's my Maslowian my Maslowian manipulation pyramid. The things you need in life is more manipulation and propaganda. Again, at the bottom is the hardest, it's the essential aspects of what you have: your identity, your selfhood, your perception, your beliefs, your moral systems, your values, up to the top. Enlightenment, truth and reality. What is truth? What is reality? None of it really exists in the way that you believe it does. And this is just a simple breakdown. You can see just on one slide the ability to manipulate perception versus perspective. So I got a couple of big lists. We're just going to talk about a couple things here and there. We're not going to get into a whole thing. You're probably familiar with the actions involved with these lists. You may not be familiar with all the terms, but if we start to talk about each of these, you're going to say, oh my God, I know this. Everybody knows gaslighting. Who doesn't know what the silent treatment is? Thanks for giving me the silent treatment. I appreciate that. And then here are the cognitive manipulations. Strategic helplessness is a great one, by the way. You get into a situation, you say, well, there's nothing I can do about that. You're sold a bill of goods that lets you believe you can't do anything, you can't influence something, when in fact you really do have the power, and you're the threat to something staying the same. And then my favorite is perceived perception management. We're going to get into that because that's one of the most devious and manipulative and the last one's emotional manipulation, social interaction. Of course, you've seen all these before. You know what these are. One of my favorites, after all I've done for you, right? You're going to do this to me. It's a fake moral argument. These are great. And anybody who wants these lists of the categories, I mean, you can have the slides too, just in case you want to practice. Now, in the center here of logical fallacies is the most used, and that is the whataboutism. Any straw man argument will fall apart if you beat it up enough with whataboutisms or what if. You can do that and apply unequal standards to any argument, and it will fail every time. So we're going to go into a couple more here. And we're going to talk about some of these scripted friendliness ideas. Censorship is safety. Loyalty is dissent. Sound familiar? War is peace. Can we live with that? How long has the United States been in a war? Anybody take a guess? Since, yeah, non-stop, right? A few weeks, we're pretty good at it, like George Carlin says, right? I can only think of short periods in my life that we haven't been at war. But the defense industry now, right, they tell us that that's peace through strength. Is it right? Is it true? There are pieces of truth in there, but is it the truth? Can you get to the truth on that? It's a hard one to identify, but that's, you know, a really good example. Let's go. Still no popcorn, okay.
It doesn't taste like sugarless gum. Tastes so good. Trident sugarless gum has long-lasting flavor. Taste the one. I get a good, fresh, clean taste, and it doesn't hurt my teeth. Taste the one that'll win you over. To sugarless gum. 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed recommend sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum. With Trident sugarless gum, I've got the best of both worlds. Taste the one that'll win you over. To sugarless gum. It's good gum.
Good gum. Oh my God. Who are these 4 out of 5 dentists? Who are the 4 out of 5 doctors that recommend Camel cigarettes for their patients that smoke cigarettes? Who are they? They're all employed by the tobacco company. In the same case here, the dentists that were recommending sugarless gum for their, you know, the people that chew gum, they're employed by the company. And in this way, the narrative is controlled to you. The standards that you believe are accepted throughout the industry are actually just employees of a company. Again, trait transfer. You got social proofing. Well, everybody's chewing sugarless gum now, so it's good for me, right? So anybody familiar with how bad like some of the sugar substitutes are for you? Yeah, it's in the medical field we call it icky. It's a technical term. You have authority bias again, 4 out of 5 dentists. Well, you don't know that they're on the payroll. And then confirmation bias, which we're all familiar with. So let's get into perceived perception management a little bit. And let's break it down. Because this goes into some of the most horrific manipulations of perception and perspective ever perpetrated against the population. Perception management. I'm going to control what you think, and it's going to attack your perception, not your perspective. Perceived, I'm going to control how you think you're being controlled, taking it a step back. Much like trying to understand what truth is, you can identify, again, true, 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 true. But if I can affect the process by which you come to your conclusion, you lose control, and that framing will change and shift. And you'll believe the story you've been told. We've fallen for it many, many times. More popcorn.
Whatever the occasion, a set of non-stick, easy clean Teflon 2 certified cookware makes a beautiful gift. So look for the Teflon 2 quality seal. It identifies the only finish tested and approved by DuPont.
Brings a tear to my eye. The propaganda is strong with this one, Luke. This is great. Everything from setting it up, the framing of how you looked at it. Did you hear the music? Everything we associate, happy birthday, anniversary, wedding, everything we associate with really wonderful, fun times in our life. They own this. This is great. This is like right out of a propaganda class I would teach. They were good students, that's for sure. So what were you sold? Anybody? What were you sold in that one? Exactly. Simplicity of love. That's what you were sold. They even wrapped it up with a ribbon, put a little bow on top. You can give it to your wife or your husband because everybody loves Teflon, right? It's the universal answer to everything. Well, maybe in a bad way. If you're not familiar, let's get into it just for a little bit here. We'll go through this and then we'll take the next one. Distrusting of institutions. And I want to talk about this for just a second. Everybody knows who DuPont is. I'm going to take a stab at that. Yeah, okay. A couple boomers in here like me, that's good. What was before boomers, Win? You, okay. No problem. So how much do we trust our institutions or, per se, the government? Don't throw the phone. It's not your talk, it's my talk. How much do you trust any organization like that? Think back to the 60s, the folks that were around back then, right? Peace, love, joy, happiness, right? Everybody was like against the system. It was a chance for voices to come out. It was a new type of a movement that changed how we think about our organizations. DuPont. Does the DuPont family actually own DuPont anymore? No. They lost control of DuPont back in 1948. And shortly after, Teflon was introduced, right? It was a creation back during World War II. Yeah, it wasn't for pans. 3M actually owned the patent for it. And they shared it with DuPont. And DuPont turned it into $1 billion a year industry. Billion. That's a lot of money that they're taking from you. Let's go to the next one, and we're going to keep building from there.
Mommy, I spilled grape juice on the carpet. That's okay.
You must have stain-resistant carpet.
She uses Resolve carpet cleaner with DuPont Teflon. With Resolve, even grape juice comes out with ease. If you don't have stain-resistant carpet,
Mommy, that's okay.
get Resolve with Teflon.
Teflon in your Resolve. Ooh, now it's on your carpets. What else is Teflon in? Slacks, jackets, hygiene products. Teflon's everywhere. Everywhere. DuPont did a great job of marketing this. You have Teflon in tons of products all around the world. So Teflon has something in it called PFOA, or C8, based on the carbon chain that's inside of it. And for years, DuPont knew that this killed people. They knew it killed them. They had the research. They had the records from 3M when they bought the patent for it. And yet they continued to push it. So how much do you really trust DuPont? Well, DuPont scientists said it was safe. That's what they told people in the public.
Chemistry is the practice of magic. People think of Teflon and they think of frying pans. Teflon is not one thing. Putting Teflon on a surface will stop bugs from crawling up trees. They'll fall right off the tree. Teflon as a chain loop is something I've come up with for bicycles. You know, only DuPont makes Teflon. And you can use it in satellites, on fabrics, or leather. When's the last time you heard about a leather raincoat? You can let your imagination run wild. It's not often that you get to make something new in this world.
If you didn't know that Teflon was killing you, that's kind of a fun commercial, right? He's laughing with us. He's letting you know. You put Teflon on your trees. Look, the bugs will fall right off. This is great. This is better than sliced bread. We can put it in everything you have. Everything. He was a scientist for Teflon. Worked in the DuPont factory. As a matter of fact, all of the scientists that knew anything about PFOA or C8 were employed by DuPont. The government had absolutely no experts in this area. DuPont set the standard. There's a movie about this called, I think, Dark Water. or Blackwater, something like that, came out in 2019, once all of the lawsuits were finally settled and DuPont had to pay. Now, for 60 years of billion-dollar profits a year, DuPont really paid through the nose. $600 million in fines. A little more than half a year's profit. That was the fine they had to pay. So why wouldn't they continue to push Teflon? Today, we're the happy, lucky recipients. PFOA is in every living creature on Earth, the estimate says. About 12 studies so far to evaluate. That's a lot. And we don't know the detrimental effects from PFOA extensively. We do know that it's linked with numerous types of cancers. And DuPont knew that before they even started putting Teflon into stuff.
Chemistry.
Dark waters, yeah, thank you. So DuPont offered up these factors. Selective disclosure. They told you what they wanted you to know about Teflon. They used experts in the field. They used their experts in the field to shape your perception. It helped you shift and believe that Teflon was good and safe. They controlled the science. They had all of the scientists. They had all of the research. And when the US government asked for the research, they gave it to them. And I can't tell you how many files it was, but it was rooms full of boxes. It was warehouses full of boxes. Information overload. That's what they did to the government when they tried to find out exactly how this chemical affected people. So DuPont used several different techniques to manipulate and control the narrative. Their fine was nothing, considering, they're making $1 billion a year in profits alone. To pay $600 million? No. Big failure. I'm not going to play that takes too long, but that's basically the scene from the movie that talks about when the lawyer finally figures out that DuPont is deliberately doing this. They were dumping all of the waste in land that they purchased that was managed by the DuPont police. Unfortunately, the water tables being what they are, the chemicals was seeping into the nearby farms, killing the livestock and killing people. So DuPont, they knew they were harming people. They designed and set up and coordinated a propaganda office. So we're going to take one exercise here, one more. And fluoride. Everybody loves fluoride in your toothpaste and your water, right? You were sold fluoride. Again, true, fluoride works. A bit. Not the whole message. Not the whole message at all. Where did fluoride come from? Anybody? Real quick. Leftover industrial waste, right. Leftover industrial waste. A lot of fluoride. Didn't know what to do with it. How do we get rid of this stuff? It's really expensive to get rid of. Well, the idea came after some preliminary research that, well, gosh, it actually helps strengthen teeth in small doses. Were you sold that as a kid? A little bit of fluoride? I think a lot of people heard that. Well, in my age group, you young kids, maybe a little different, but then we put fluoride in the water. And we didn't take a look at how much fluoride was put in stuff.
The water in Frankfort, Indiana has fluoride to help protect children's teeth, but that's not enough. I'm Myrna Walker.
No audio
As
here.
a child,
Okay.
I was in a special
too bad.
Crest test in Frankfurt. It proved Crest fluoride gives extra cavity-fighting protection wherever the water is fluoridated. Today, my whole family uses Crest, and we have great checkups.
A fluoridated water test showed Crest gives extra cavity-fighting protection wherever the water is fluoridated.
Nobody's come up with anything better than Crest. We're staying with it.
You can count on Crest for a future of good checkups. Tests prove it. Crest is accepted by the American Dental Association.
Tests prove it. Thank you, Abby. What tests? I'm glad you asked. The scientists at Crest ran the tests themselves. And you may not believe this, but it was 4 out of 5 scientists agreed that fluoride was good for you. It was amazing. That's an attractive number for American citizens, by the way, 4 out of 5. A lot of research on that. You'll bite on that all the time, by the way. So, with fluoride, there was a little incident back in the mid-50s or so. Scientists were doing independent tests on fluoride. And there was an issue. There was a problem. Anybody see Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Love the Bomb, right? And there's a scene in there where they're talking about the fluoridation in water and that, it was a communist plot. And that was specifically called out by Stanley Kubrick because of the silencing of dissent over fluoride use. Most of the independent research at the time showed that fluoride was bad. It causes neurodevelopmental disorders. And we don't have final science on it yet. There's still issues. But we were all sold the fact that we need to have fluoride in our toothpaste and fluoride in our water. And we bought it. We bought it. How many animals in the animal kingdom use fluoride when they brush? Just saying. We're kind of different like that. Huge, huge, huge manipulation campaign. And you'll never guess who created the manipulation campaign. Yes, it was Edward Bernays. Remember the guy who created the Smoking is Independence and Equality for Women? Same dude. Still creating propaganda campaigns against you. And why did we get into propaganda in the States? Back during World War I, President Wilson created an office that directly prescribed propaganda to the American citizens. He had campaigned on the fact that we didn't want to go to war. We're not going to go to war. I promise you we're not going to go to war. We're never going to go to war. I'm elected. We're going to go to war. And he kind of shifted it up a little bit. But he didn't have any teeth to get the American people to call for a mandate. So he created an office that directly put propaganda against U.S. citizens and fed you a daily supply of it. And it wasn't him that declared we were going to go to war. It was us. We declared we were going to go to war. We demanded President Wilson put us in that war. One of the tools he used was something called the 4-Minute Men. Now, the 4-Minute Men, keeping it G-rated, the 4-Minute Men were a group of athletes, prominent figures, much like today. You'd see some athlete selling you something. You'd see somebody well-respected in the community standing up talking, not like me or something, but somebody you really respect. And they would sell you something. Well, back in the day, again, spontaneous trait transfer, to affect your perception of what you're understanding, these people would get up, and back in the early teens, mid-teens, the big thing was a movie house. So you'd have reels of film, right? Everybody who went to school in the 60s, 50s, or 40s, or whatever. Okay, they understand that you'd have to have a reel of film that would run for 20 minutes or so, and then you'd have to back it up, rewind it, change the reel, feed it back through, and start the next reel. Well, that takes how long? 4 minutes. And during that 4-minute break, you'd have someone stand up there and tell you why they believed we should go to war. And we were sold that in every movie house. So it became a groundswell. And that's where the concept of propagandizing American citizens came into play. So Bernays took that idea, and that's where he made the book, Propaganda, that became the Bible of advertising and political movements. So again, what happens with fluoride today? The science is not totally settled as far as how much is good and how much is bad. We definitely know that neurodevelopmental disorders are caused by too much fluoride. Absolutely. But where's the line that is going to be safe and beneficial versus where it's going to be a detriment? So the key aspects of perception management, perceived perception management here used in fluoride distribution inside of different products. And you can read them for yourself, so I'm not going to sit there and read them. But it absolutely follows it follows an understanding of who you are. And it speaks to you and hides directly what you need to know and what you need to understand to make an informed decision. So, numerous other cases we could go through and we could talk about that have happened. So, what really is truth? What's true? If you're sold these things over a lifetime, do you really know what the truth is? Hard to say. But if you control your perception and you can manage how you perceive things from different angles, you can better understand the information that's being sent to you. If you see something that says 4 out of 5 doctors recommend, okay, that's 15 yards. That's a personal foul, right? Straight off. Don't ever fall for that again. Find out who those people are, where the data came from. Otherwise, your framing is going to change and you're going to lose your perspective. And with that, I'll close up and ask if there's any questions. No. All right, thank you.